For the July the 22nd for the Toowoomba Regional Council. The meeting is open to the public and will also be live streamed. I'd like to thank those who are in the room with us today and acknowledge everyone who is watching via Council social media channels. I'd like to acknowledge the Aboriginal parties whose songlines traverse these lands we meet on today, the Western Waka Waka, Guyabul and Jarowair peoples, and pay respects to their elders past, present and emerging, for they hold the knowledge, rich traditions and bold ambitions of Australia's first people. I'd also like to acknowledge my councillor colleague, Councillor Carl, Portfolio Leader in Planning and Development. Thanks everyone for making the time to be here today. So we have one apology, Councillor Summerfield. Can I have someone move that we grant her leave? Councillor Melissa Taylor and Councillor McDonald. All those in favour? It's carried. So can I have someone move the suspension of standing orders, please? Councillor McMahon, Mayor Antonio. All those in favour? Thank you. So we move to item number 4, which is the Material Change of Use Code Air Service Equipment Storage Facility. And Richard is going to present to us today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't know if this microphone's working, but I guess you've got to go very close to it. Could we just go to the aerial shot on the screen, just so that we can get a location, please? Okay. Thank you for that. So basically today we just got an application that's been received. It was made by council over council-owned land, that is the Toowoomba Aerodrome. The application is for air service and it's an equipment storage shed. The property is located at 430 Greenwattle Street, and as you can see from the aerial map there, it's highlighted in red there. And if this were, yeah, there you go. It's just on the southern side of the actual runway. As I said, this is actually a separate parcel of land to the main aerial or area runway strip, but it is still part of the aerodrome. Effectively what it is, as I said, it's equipment storage shed, and under the planning scheme that comes under the definition of air service. The shed itself is 112 square metres in area, and that's about a 14 by 8 metre shed. It's a relatively low shed. I think the maximum height is well under 5 metres. As I said, access to the shed, it will be from the actual runway itself on the northern side, and there is no proposed external access from either of the street frontages. The application is code accessible as it's located in the specialised centre zone, and it's also in the Toowoomba Airport precinct. In summary, really, the shed is effectively to store airside equipment such as lawnmowers and those sorts of things, which are being relocated from the main building that's currently on the airport grounds. Effectively, the application, as I said, is code accessible. It's been assessed against all aspects of the scheme relating to a code accessible application. It's been found to be compliant with all those matters. There are conditions which are located in the recommendation. Effectively, the application has really come to council today as it is an application over council-owned land by council, and it's just to ensure that the transparency of the decision-making process. In summary, the recommendation is to actually approve it subject to a few conditions. As I said, the shed is basically of a domestic scale. It's not out of character with the area, and it's therefore recommended for approval. Thanks.
Any questions, councillors? Councillor McDonald?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Really, I'm happy to move it, but before doing so, this is as a result of a previous application for the redevelopment or from Angel Flight, was that right? For one of the Rotary clubs?
For
Doctors?
Flying Doctors.
Royal Flying Doctors. Is this as a result of that, shifting the product from there into this shed?
I'm not privy to all previous involvement, but I do understand and have been informed that it is basically because part of the actual existing building will be used for other purposes, so they needed the space.
Sounds like that's the case, yeah. No, I'm happy to move it.
We're in, yeah.
Is there any other questions? Councillor Carl? Oh, Councillor Shine.
Yeah, okay. I noticed that there would appear to me to be an exception made here with respect to the distance from the boundary. The southern, normally it has to be 100 metres, and on this occasion it's only going to be 5. Apparently that's okay. How does that work?
Yeah, sort of discussed in the report. Sorry about that. The microphone's
You can
putting
move
me
a
off a
little
bit,
bit away from it. It'll pick
yep,
up your voice.
it
Yeah.
still works. Effectively, the main reason is that airport services and specialised services encompasses a range of uses. In this case, it's an actual storage shed. So in certain circumstances, you would expect certain buildings to be located or try to locate them 100 metres away from a boundary. In this instant, it's effectively a domestic shed, except it will be used for airside equipment storage. The reason that we've accepted a lesser setback, I think it's 5 metres, is ultimately because it's actually commensurate with the surrounding built environment. There's actually no activities occurring within that shed that would cause nuisance to the adjoining neighbours. The setback is sufficient to ensure that you have no overshadowing of that adjoining premises to the south. And effectively, it's a colour-bond shed, so it really is something that doesn't need to be set back as 100 metres or more from an adjoining premises to ensure that they've got appropriate amenity, effectively.
You might have a different view, though, if you were the resident on the southern border, one assumes, who also, I noticed that there is a fall of the land of about 1 metre. And how will that work, with rainfall on the buildings and discharge of water from them?
Yeah. Basically, when we've gone out and had a quick look at the site, it is relatively flat. So the section that they're actually looking at putting it in requires very limited groundworks. As I've said, effectively, given the fact that the shed is of domestic scale, we've looked at it from the perspective of any other similar domestic shed you might find in an urban environment. You wouldn't normally expect a 5 metre setback from a boundary for a normal domestic size shed. I've sort of looked at that and taken that into account. Secondly, I've also thought or taken into account that the shed itself would probably assist in providing an actual acoustic or visual barrier from that southern house from the actual operations of the runway. So in some respects, it actually provides additional amenity to what is currently there, because effectively it's an open sort of field, I suppose, currently to the runway.
Councillor Carl? Sorry, Councillor Shine, had you got your answer?
Matter of taste, I suppose, as to whether you want to look at a metal wall or you want to look at aeroplanes coming and going. I'd prefer the latter myself.
Yep.
Councillor Carl?
Madam Chair, I will ask my question on the back end of Councillor Shine's. I had some thoughts about, whilst it's to store mowers and the like and airstrip maintenance type material, will there be any maintenance activities carried out in that shed, i.e. repairs to mowers or grinders or nothing?
No.
Okay.
No.
I just had some concerns with noise given the distance, that's all.
Councillor O'Shea?
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. Just a question with this. Obviously very, very supportive of it, as I'm sure we all are, and understand the reasonings around it. This aerodrome obviously has had a bit of development in recent time, and obviously master planning around the future of it and future uses, etc. So when the decision was made with this going here, did that marry up with that or consult with that? It doesn't constrain the site in any way for future development? Because as I said, I think, and Councillor Carol Taylor might add to it as well, I guess, but there's been quite a lot of activity out there, as I said, and views of how it can expand and what further can happen. So I guess it's just important that we need to look at that where this is placed. And look, I can probably know the answer to this, but I mean where it's placed and that doesn't constrain anything, etc.
No, effectively the master planning of the airport, this is an area where it's actually not designated for any major sort of projects, I suspect. So that's why they've located it to this southern extent.
Thank you.
Councillor Carol Taylor?
We've done the master plan, you were there, and this is an area that doesn't impinge on that in my view. But just a question, I'd like to see us consider putting some solar panels on the northern lean of that shed in the future, I guess. It's quite a large roof space and probably not the time to talk about it now, but I'm happy to move this motion. So, as we know, this was equipment that was stored, and we've found another use and more community-based use for for the area where it's been displaced from, and this is an area. In this particular area, when this airstrip was upgraded, and prior to the floods, which we were quite lucky that happened, we got money from the government for that. That's where the works equipment and stuff was stored there, and on the parkland. So it's near airside there, as you see where the run-in area is there near the terminal. So I don't believe in any way that it would restrict any development for the future.
I might just ask Richard, if I may, about the infrastructure charges. Can you sort of run us through that? What happens? And I know we've got a session coming about council.
My understanding is that the actual charges resolution, possibly number 4, the draft that you're actually looking at, and I believe you're doing that either today or
Not
soon,
today.
or it's been deferred.
Next.
In any case, the current charges regime would attract an actual charge if it's actually decided under charges resolution number 3. The upcoming proposed amendments would actually not have any charge in relation to this use. So it largely depends upon whether that new charges resolution is adopted in its current format and whether that's actually adopted prior to this decision, I suppose, being formally decided as to whether it attracts a charge.
Yes.
Anything else?
Well, I suppose that's the discussion, isn't it? And how to the transparency and the tracking of it, isn't it? Yeah. So I suppose if this is decided today, then it will attract the old infrastructure under the old infrastructure charges regime. Is that correct? Yeah.
I'd say so. Yes. Yes.
Okay.
So
Councillor Carol Taylor.
perhaps that should be added to the council's contribution to the community with the space for the Flying Doctor amenity.
Did you have any comment on that, Danielle? Or?
I don't mean added, but it should be, what I mean is we should perhaps add that to in kind that we have given up for that.
Generally, at the current time where there is development, in effect council making application for development on its own land, where infrastructure charges have been levied, they have been the subject of some internal discussions, so it's probably something that can be dealt with operationally, internally, without necessarily requiring a report to come to council seeking a formal waiver, so we will pursue that.
Thank you, Danielle.
Is there any further questions or comment? Councillor Shine, yeah.
Thank you. I noticed under specialised centre zone, it refers to the usual requirement that one of the usual requirements that a densely planted landscape strip having a minimum width of 3 metres needs to be placed there, bearing in mind the residents in the house next door on the southern side now will have a shed within 5 metres. But that requirement for the landscape is not being proceeded with either, for the reasons for security and maintenance purposes. Screening fences and dense vegetation are not proposed. But bearing in mind what I said about the proximity of the shed, obliterating the view that they had before, is it really necessary to do away with that requirement that a hedge be planted there?
Certainly, in the recommendation and the report that I've tabled, I've argued, obviously, given that there's the aerodrome grounds, we want to ensure that you've got safety and security is paramount. So you want to ensure that the actual shed itself has a certain degree of visibility. Secondly, the other reason why we've argued, I suppose, against implementing that is because the shed itself is actually fairly significantly set away from the actual Greenwater Street frontage and indeed the actual other cul-de-sac. It is set in there behind that existing house, and as I suggested earlier, the actual setback of 5 metres is more generous than you would expect for a normal domestic size shed or a house for that matter, and you wouldn't impose screening measures in that circumstance. Well, and yes, the other thing is, depending on plants and that, there's a possibility that additional planting could actually attract wildlife such as birds, which obviously from the operational perspective of the airport, we don't really want to increase that possibility.
That may be so, but it is part of council's PO2, whatever development provides that. It's our council's
Yep.
provision. You know.
Yeah, as I've said in the report, effectively, the POs are effectively a guideline, if you will. The overall effect is amenity, and you've got to weigh that up in terms of the actual use that you're assessing. Being an actual aerodrome and being related to the airport, we've given a very high weight to the safety and the operations of the airport.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Carol Taylor?
Can I ask through you, please, what would be a setback for a shed in the urban area if that were just a shed? Can you just tell me how much that is, please? And also, I'm talking about the wildlife. I mean, this is an aerodrome, a working aerodrome, and you do not want to attract birds and or hares or anything else like that. So it's about safety, and we do not need any of that on the aerodrome.
Just in relation to that, to answer your question, I suppose in a residential zone, a house and an ancillary shed wouldn't actually require a town planning permit.
No.
So it wouldn't normally be assessed through the planning scheme. And depending upon through the building regulations, there is a possibility a shed could actually be located on a boundary as well.
Yeah, thank you. That's what I thought. Thank you.
So if there's no further questions, I might have someone move that we reinstate standing orders. Thank you, Councillor O'Shea, Councillor McDonald. All those in favour? It's carried. So, councillors, we have the recommendation there before you. Can I have someone move the officer's recommendation? Councillor Carol Taylor, Councillor Antonio. All those in favour? It's carried unanimously. And that is the end of the meeting at 2:20. Thank you, Wendy. Thanks, councillors.
With the